You.
Yes. So listeners to the show will have known that I have a mother who I love a lot, and she died actually in March. And it's not something that I talked about a lot, her illness, partly because of the nature of her work. As we'll find out later in the show, she was a psychoanalyst in private practice, and there was a certain amount of kind of confidentiality, frankly. So I didn't talk a lot about her illness, but also it was just something that, as sometimes happens, Cheryl, your mom died in a way that was a much quicker course to the illness. For my mom, she first got cancer about 7.5 years ago. She had ultimately, I think, 3 or 4 serious cancers. And I have been mourning her loss in various ways for quite a while. Right. And especially because in my mom's case, it was so clear that with each cancer she was getting weakened. When reading was taken from her, that was it.
Yeah.
This is a woman who reread at least one Charles Dickens novel every year. She had read every single one of them. She read everything.
And she was a writer, too.
She was a writer, too. That's
she had
right.
an enormous life of the mind and a really amazing career.
Yeah,
and we're going to talk about that today. And I think that a very classic scenario we're going to be discussing here in letter 1 is the balance between mothering, giving to your child that love that you have and that you want to give and that time that you want to give. And then what do you do about the career? Right. Your mom has grappled with this all of her life. She had what? 3 sons.
Yeah. She was one of 6 women in Yale Medical School at the time, and a whole bunch of men. So she was ambitious in that way. I don't know how she did it, but I do know that she paid a price for it. Yeah. And she paid the kind of price that, it's a private burden that a lot of mothers, I think all mothers to one extent or another, take on, which is they're doing what they're doing, and inside they feel oftentimes, even for everything that they're doing, plagued by guilt.
Right.
Because they're trying to do things that are essentially impossible, and they're trying to do them perfectly.
Mm-hmm. So before your mom got sick enough that this was impossible, we asked her to be on the show.
Right.
And we recorded a conversation with her that I think is so sweet we're going to get to hear today.
Yep.
We asked her to consider this letter that I'm going to read in a moment with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so she'll be on momentarily.
She will. And I want to sort of note that part of her life experience, what it led to was it culminated in the writing of this book, The Monster Within, which was really about maternal guilt and maternal ambivalence. Mm-hmm. Just to frame the letter, I want to give people an idea of what it's about. Here's how she talks about this subject. It gradually became clear to me that fears about adequate mothering span a spectrum in time, beginning long before the prospective mother's decision about childbearing and extending throughout her life as both a mother and a daughter.
And ambivalence, a lot of that guilt that we're going to discuss today, it's not ambivalence about loving your child. I think that there is that ambivalence, and we've discussed that on previous episodes.
Right.
But on this one, it's more like what happens when the other demands of our lives pull us in other directions.
Mm-hmm.
So let me read this letter.
Yep.
Dear Sugars, I'm a 30-year-old living in Brooklyn, New York. I have been ambitious my entire life, and I've had a very successful career thus far. I've always loved my work, taking pride in it, and I currently make more than my husband. For a good portion of my life, I thought I would never have children due to medical complications. We were actually not trying to have a baby, but our miracle arrived. Since he arrived 3 months ago, I have spent all of my time taking care of him. He is the new joy of my life. I wake up every day thinking of him, and I go to bed thinking of him as well. I never thought I would debate going back to work, but now I'm at a crossroads. I love my little boy, and I can't imagine not being present for all of his firsts. The thought of going back to work sickens me, and I don't know what to do. Due to the nature of my profession, it's impossible to be part-time. I've never been a person to not give 100% of myself. That's why I was so successful at my job, and it's also why I feel like going back would not allow me to give the same 100% to my son. Do I quit the job I thought I loved to stay home with my baby and hope to regain my career once he's older? Or do I join the millions of other women who juggle motherhood and professionalism daily? Yours, Debating Mom. Honestly, I want to just say to you, Debating Mom, welcome to motherhood, that this kind of conflict is part of being a mother, even if you don't have a full-time career. And I think this is where we get into all this mom guilt stuff. This is maybe why your own mom struggled, because we have a very, very strong narrative in this culture. Like, who's the good mother? Even though many of us reject this notion, we can almost all of us, like if we did a call out right now and said, write to us, like, what's that ideal mother? It's the mother who doesn't work outside the home. It's the mother who is great at like baking cookies and is always there, for everyone
play,
and volunteers
right.
at the school and all of that stuff. I know lots of women who do fulfill that, and they're great people, and they too feel conflicted.
Right.
They say to me, oh, I sometimes wonder if I should be modeling for my kids, having a career and being more independent in the world in the ways, again, that we define independence.
Right.
I don't think a woman who has a career is any more independent than a woman who doesn't have a career, but I think that these narratives about who mothers are have been really put in black and white terms. And so debating mom, I think you should do what you want to do. And if you were writing to us and saying, I really love my son and I want to give him 100%, but I really miss my job, should I go back to work? I would say go back to work. But what you're saying is...
The thought of going back to work sickens me.
That's right.
Right. As a culture, we have sort of set for mothers two impossible tasks side by side and said, and by the way, you're on your own.
Yeah.
And I think that's how this woman feels. I think debating mother and mom that you feel you have to decide and you have to make the right decision or else ...
Yeah.
My mom struggled with this impossible burden for, most of her life, from the time she was in her mid-20s until she died at 77, for 50 years. And she turned it over and over in her mind and realized there's something that hasn't been spoken about here, which is the impossible situations that we're putting mothers in and they're putting themselves in to live up to 100% in doing two jobs, and never mind also keeping a marriage alive and keeping other forms of fulfillment. My mom played piano. She loved to read. Those are things that were important to her soul, but they also took time and energy. How do you balance all that and still feel good about the kind of mothering you're doing? So I think the best thing we can do is listen to some of that conversation we had with her.
Let's hear it.
It's certainly not an unusual dilemma. In these days where women work at careers that can be very time-consuming, and, where the amount that they're willing to work has something to do with their advancement at work.
Right.
And so I think this is a question that any woman who takes her job seriously and also takes her family seriously, children that is, has to wrestle with. And I have the impression that these days women don't have the flexibility that they had, for instance, about 25 years ago or more when I was in that situation.
What do you mean by flexibility, Ma?
Well, what I mean by that is to work part-time, to work perhaps a less rough schedule, even if part-time,
Right.
to have, reasonable maternity leave. Well, that's a whole other problem because I don't think American maternity leave is long enough.
Right. Well, Ma, can you talk a little bit about how you wrestled with this? Our letter writer, Debating Mom, clearly identifies herself as somebody who's ambitious. She's the chief breadwinner in her home. She's in a field that requires 100% commitment, as she says. How did you negotiate this as a young doctor who suddenly found herself in the space of 2 years with 3 kids?
Well, first of all, none of my pregnancies were accidents, and this woman implies that she didn't expect to get pregnant.
That's
and
true.
Probably then didn't take precautions. But when she had the baby, she's thrilled with him. It's very understandable. But, she hasn't been able to make any plans in advance. In my situation, your father and I decided to have a baby such that the baby would be born right at the time that I completed my internship. And I didn't have to go into the next step, which was residency, right away. And so Dad went right on to residency, and I, found some part-time work that I could do while, being mostly home with the baby.
Were you happy with that, or was there a part of you, like Debating Mom, who really just wanted to be with the baby for a while? In other words, was your ambition saying to you, I have to have this life outside of being a mom?
Well, I Yes, I did feel that second thing. It wasn't that I didn't want to be home with, in this case, David, and then when you guys were born, with all three of you. I wanted to, but I also didn't want to break the line of my training.
Yes.
I mean, if the medical field said, any woman who's graduated from medical school can take 3 years off and, have children and that, but they don't do that. I mean, you've got to make your own arrangements and you've got to continue your career planning. In my case, I was able to do some things part-time. Made a big difference.
What do you think? Debating Mom says it sickens her to think of going back to work full-time when she has this baby.
Yeah.
I know none of us can tell someone else what to do, but what advice would you give her in making this decision?
Well, it seems to me if going back to work sickens her, how happy is she going to be if she does go back to work, even part-time? It's strange. She's made it very difficult. She wants to be present for all of his firsts. And she says, due to the nature of my profession, it's impossible to be part-time.
Right.
It seems to me she's kind of answered her own question. Mm-hmm. What I'm reading into this is that she'll be more miserable if she doesn't at least have some real time with this baby till he gets a bit older and a good a housekeeper or babysitter can take care of him part-time.
Yeah.
By the time he's 2, she'll be sick of him.
Right.
I think what you said was very wise, that she's answered her own question. I will say, as a mother myself, that in that first year, so much of our bond was about that, physical attachment. I couldn't imagine leaving my kids for the day, when they were babies. But by the time they were toddlers, it did become a little easier to take a bit more time to go to work and have actually physical separation. Did you find that to be the case in your own years mothering?
Yes. I think when the baby and then the other 2 babies, one of whom is on this program, were born, I didn't want to do anything else but be with them.
Right.
But as they got older, it was a little bit easier to work part-time. And as I think about it, I really did work what other people in my profession considered part-time. I was at work at 9 in the morning and left at about 3 or 3:30. And as the kids got older, that changed. It probably was about as good as it could be, but I don't feel good about it. I feel I shortchanged them.
Huh. I have to say, Mom, that part of what I think I've realized, certainly in being with Erin and certainly reading your book and talking with all the moms who I know, is there's no ma who thinks they got the balance right. Mm-mm. There's no mom who's in this situation of 2 very strong drives, the drive to be with the baby or babies at home and children, and the drive to continue the work, the important work that they feel they're called to do in the world. It seems to me that there's no mom who says, I did it right, I did it perfectly.
Right. Well, and in the case of my mom, it wasn't a drive to be in the world and pursue her career. It was the need to make money.
Right.
There was no personal passion associated with her work. She had to go to work so that she could pay our bills.
And in a certain way, I think that was difficult in a whole set of ways. But the dilemma that Debating Mom is facing is that it's really her ambition against her baby. And I guess what I would say is that sense of I want to do it 100% is part of the culprit here. Mm-hmm. The idea that it can't be half measure, it has to be full measure. It has the feeling of the kind of expectation that we put on ourselves that makes ambitious people succeed, but that oftentimes makes them very unhappy along the way. Mm-hmm. And the way that you framed it, and I think Cheryl and I and even my mom are saying maybe you need to try to reframe this dilemma so it isn't just work or the baby. I think I would ask you to consider whether it's a good idea to give yourself a moratorium. Just give yourself a few months to be at home with your baby and see how much you really enjoy that life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, sadly, Debating Mom may not have the luxury of giving herself that time because it sounds to me like she has a job that she's either going to return to or she's going to lose. And I know this is sort of above and beyond Debating Mom's question, but what a shame as a culture that this woman is put in this position.
Yeah, I mean, you have to really think about it because I think ambitious people, especially women who have to face so many barriers inherently still, even as far as we've come, women still have to be extra hardcore. So she has this sense of like, I better keep my place here because I've worked so hard to get it. And if I step out of line for a second, it's going to be filled.
Yeah.
But try not to see it as a binary where your baby is the enemy of your ambition and your ambition is the enemy of spending time with your baby.
Right. And on a final note, whatever you choose to do, debating mom, will be okay. Because one thing I know for sure is that your son will know that he is the light of your life, the center of your life, whether you have a job that demands a lot from you or not. And trust me, as a mother who works more than I want to and more than is probably great for my family, I also know that my kids never doubt my love and my commitment. Last night, I was sort of feeling like, I'd not been spending too much time with my kids these last couple days. And
He's just stuck in here
because
with
I'm
me.
in the studio with Steve Almond. And I went into my son's room as he was getting ready for bed. And I said to him, have I done a good job? It's funny because you think as the mother, like you're the one in charge. And I said, am I a good mom? Have I done a good job? I miss you. Do you feel like I'm there for you? And my son grabbed me and he said, oh, Mom, yes, you're a great mom. And he kissed me. And when he kissed me, he kind of like bit me in that kind of nibbly way, the way I used to nibble him when he was a baby. And I loved him so much, I felt like I could eat him.
Yeah.
And he did that to me. And I laughed. And as I was laughing, tears came into my eyes because I thought, all is forgiven, that I've done my best as a mother. I'm the breadwinner. I'm the mother. I'm the person who loves those two people more than I ever knew I could love. And they know it. And debating mom, your son will know it too.
Yeah. It's very, very tough for her because it's clear that both things mean a great deal to her.
That's right. Mom, it's always a delight to hear your voice. And no matter what you think, you are the best mom in the world. Just so everybody knows that for the record. And we really appreciate your offering your wise counsel to debating mom.
Through the ages, mothers have not stayed home alone. There have been families.
Yes.
There have been in-laws. I mean, it's something about this kind of isolated society that many of us live in that leave mothers feeling, there's nobody to help out. I mean, grandmothers are very important if they can pitch into this.
That's right.
And if they're not mean.
All right. Well, you, as one of the world's sweeter grandmothers and moms, we thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Oh, thank you both also.
Bye.
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 Last Seen, a new podcast from WBUR and the Boston Globe, investigates the largest unsolved art heist in history.
So about the time that he begins putting the duct tape on, he says, this is a robbery.
The theft of $500 million worth of art from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston.
When the FBI says, we solved it, we know who did it, it's like, no, you don't, because you don't have the paintings.
Subscribe and listen to Last Seen now on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Sponsored by Samuel Adams and ADT Smart Home.
I'm Michelle Goldberg.
I'm Ross Douthat. And I'm David Leonhardt. We're the hosts of The Argument, a new podcast from the New York Times opinion section. These days, it's more important than ever to listen to people who disagree with you. Maybe they'll teach you something new. Or maybe they'll just teach you how to beat them. So listen to The Argument from the New York Times. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen.
Steve, I was really moved listening to your mom. How did it feel for you?
Well, it's so funny. That's who she is. She's very warm, but also you could hear self-deprecating.
Oh.
And you could hear me saying, no, Mom, you're a great mom. You're a great grandmother. Like, I really want this to land with debating mom and all the moms who are listening. It's really hard to convince yourself that you're doing it well enough.
Yeah.
It is this doubt that haunts you at all times. It's true of dads, but the pressure's less for dads. You know the deal.
Oh, it's absolutely.
Dads take the kids to the grocery store and they're like national heroes. They get a postage stamp. It's just a different arrangement. And I feel that my mom was so deep inside that experience for so long, but she was also really beautifully able to draw back from it and say, this is the gift that I have to give to the world. I'm glad that she was on Earth and that I got lucky enough in the big lottery to be her kid. That's how I feel.
Well, I know she felt the same way about you. You're really right when you say that doubt is so much part of parenthood and specifically motherhood. Mm-hmm. It's actually been one of the most surprising things for me in becoming a mom, because what it reveals is that I'm always uncertain about whether I'm doing a good job.
Right.
So we're going to talk about a different kind of doubt in our next letter. Will you read it for us?
I will. And in fact, you'll see that there's been sort of a collision course that results in this letter. Dear Sugars, my mom has been battling a rare and aggressive cancer for the last 3 years, and my husband and I put our lives on hold and moved back to my hometown to help her. You see, my only sibling is my younger brother who has severe autism, and my parents are divorced. My father is still involved in my brother's life, and my parents don't hate each other. But since my mom's diagnosis, I have been her main source of support. I have seen her through 5 surgeries, countless medical appointments, and rounds of chemotherapy, and have been intimately involved in just about every aspect of her life. At the same time, I have been trying to maintain some semblance of a life with my husband. We desperately wanted to start a family, but agonized over whether it was a good time in light of the time and stress involved in being so available to my mom. We finally decided that a relatively uncomplicated time had presented itself. My mom was doing well, and my brother had moved into a group home, and we went for it. This past June, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. She is amazing and is the absolute light of my life. But when she was just 8 weeks old, we received the news that my mother's cancer had spread and that treatment was no longer working. She was given less than 6 months to live. Since that time, she has steadily been wasting away before my eyes. I thought I could do it all, but new parenthood is so much harder than I expected and requires every bit of my energy and time. My mom assures me that she wants me to put my baby first, and I know that I cannot be the mom I need to be for my daughter if I'm caring for my own mom as intensely as I want to. But Sugars, how do I get over the guilt? I feel that my mom is suffering without me because of my decision to have a baby. How do I reconcile the need to care for both of them when I can't? I love them both so much, and it feels as though there is no middle ground here. I cannot imagine a way through this where I'm not letting one or the other down. I'm so emotionally overwhelmed. The world as I know it is fresh and full of possibility and imploding all at once. I oscillate between feelings of pure delight and utter sadness, and neither emotion feels okay in these circumstances. How can I savor the precious moments of my daughter's infancy and the last moments of my mom's life at the same time? How do I make peace with the timing of all this and with myself for my choices? Sincerely, overwhelmed.
Oh, this is an overwhelming era of her life, for sure.
This is the intersection of the two most emotionally and psychologically demanding eras of somebody's life. Seeing a mom through her dying days and honoring that and being present and doing what you can to love her and support her while you can, and doing that same thing in a child's first 6 months of life, and I might add, without a support system here. It sounds like she's on her own on an island, and on one half of the island is her mom who's dying, and the other half of the island is her baby who she loves intensely. I mean, it just feels like an utterly impossible situation.
It does. But I want to say to overwhelmed, there's often a difference between what something feels like and what something is.
Right.
And I think my deep sense is that overwhelmed, listen to your mom. Of course she wants you to be there for your daughter. Of course she wants you to take joy in this moment of your life, as you should. And by doing so, you are honoring your mother most deeply. I think that, becoming a mother and letting that love that your mother gave to you flow through to your daughter is just one of the most beautiful ways that you can honor her and remember her. And I also want to say, the mother dying and the daughter being born and just coming into life are presented, and it seems perceived, as these two things that are in opposition to each other. And in so many ways they are, right? The opposite of birth is death.
Right.
And it is intense and difficult that these two big things are happening to you at the same moment of your life. But I will say that I think my sense is that in retrospect, you're going to remember a lot of really beautiful moments too.
Right.
This is the chance you have to connect your mom to your daughter. This is the chance that you have to really create memories for yourself that will probably carry you through the years ahead when it comes to grieving the mother that your daughter probably will never
Right.
know and remember. I think that the bigger thing here is that emotional or spiritual journey that she's on in letting her mother go during
Yeah.
this time that she's loving, her daughter.
Right. One of the things that you have here is a pretty amazing opportunity. I know that sounds like an odd thing to say, but look, caring for a baby, especially in infancy, they're not doing a whole lot. They're feeding, they're lying, they're gurgling, they're rolling over. That's all stuff that happens in a very small space. And because of your mom's situation, she's also in a very limited small space. You need to bring those two people together, because I guarantee you that unless your mom says it's too painful to see this child or it's too exhausting or something, she wants to see that baby. The one thing that my mom that kept her going, I honestly believe that it prolonged her life, was spending time with my kids. We had a visit really in the late stages of when the cancer was really taking her down. And by the end of this visit, I went out just with my two big kids. I was worried that my mom might be frightening to the kids because she wasn't eating as much. She'd grown very gaunt. And it's real, at the end, it's very real.
Yeah.
And they picked up on it. But you know what else? They really wanted to be with her. And by the end of that visit, we were spending almost all of our time in her room, her and my dad's room. The kids were snuggling up. They were reading books. They were playing Legos. And just those small things meant the world to her.
Yeah.
Your mom, sit next to your mom and feed your baby and let your baby lie and gurgle and be what that baby is, and let that be the one balm that will give your mom a feeling of, if not hope and joy, some sense of real pleasure that you've done this amazing thing. Because what good parents want, and it sounds to me like you had a good parent, is they want their kids to be happy.
They do. I agree with you. Bring those two together. But she asked Steve, and I think we should really spend some time addressing this with Overwhelmed, because I think so many other of our listeners struggle with this too. She feels guilty. How does she get over that feeling, and even that feeling that I've expressed, like, have I done the right thing in my life as a mother? And frankly, as a daughter who also watched her mom die of cancer.
Right.
I wasn't with my mom the last night of her life.
Right.
And I regret that. And I feel guilty about that, even though I don't have a rational reason to feel guilty about that. There were reasons that I wasn't there at that moment, right? So how do we get over guilt?
Yeah. The cure to guilt is self-forgiveness. That's it. And it's a real recognition that the situation you're in is an intense human moment. And it's extraordinarily painful to watch your mom die. And it's extraordinarily beautiful and joyous to watch your daughter come into the world and feel the love that you feel for her. And you can feel both of those things at the same time and actually are feeling them. And that's allowed.
Yeah.
You present a kind of extreme circumstance where, you're the only person, you're the central caretaker for a baby and central caretaker for a dying mom. I can't speak to that exactly, but I was for the last, 6 or 7 years trying to balance how much do I give to my mom as I know she's battling this illness that will take her ultimately, and how much do I give to my kids. And I had a mom, Overwhelmed, who I think is a lot like your mom. She wanted me to be a good and loving parent. That was part of how she had raised me. And she wanted me, in some ways, not to make some of the mistakes that she had made around her own parenting, that is, not esteeming how good a mom she was. When we listen to her talk, and when I think about, the final days and weeks I spent with her, the saddest thing for me to encounter was that after everything she'd done and been, she was still beating herself up. She still blamed herself for getting cancer. She said to me, as she is dying of cancer, I feel I'm letting everybody down. That is no kind of way to go to the grave. And she wrote that book, The Monster Within, to relieve other people of a burden that she privately carried with her. And overwhelmed, please don't do that to yourself.
Yeah. I think that the way to get over that guilt is absolutely about rewriting that narrative of what is being there for somebody, what is giving 100%, what is helping someone die.
Right.
I think we all have these ideas, again, like that idea of the good mom. And so what's a good daughter? What's a good son?
Right.
What's a good caretaker? Those can also look different ways. And what's happened, Overwhelmed, is you were able to be one version of a caretaker before you became a mother yourself. I mean, you moved back to the town where your mother lived so that you could take care of her.
Mm-hmm.
She knows that. And now you have to become a different version. And it can be just as caring. It can be just as nurturing and loving to your mom.
Right.
I think that you need to let go of that former daughter you used to be and be the new daughter in light of your own motherhood. Right. And I think that your mother would be proud of you for doing that.
And is, I think.
Yeah.
It's a fantasy to think, well, if I'm there more, then what? I'm sorry to say this bluntly, but your mom's still going to be dying of cancer. That's bigger than you.
Mm-hmm.
Your being caring and attentive isn't going to make that go away. All you can do at a certain point, and you've been through the ringer, as with my mom, who had 4 different cancers, 3 different chemos, 3 different surgeries. At a certain point, it becomes about palliative care, and it becomes about creating moments and opportunities for her to feel joy, happiness, distraction. I mean, this is the stuff that I was doing in that visit. And I realized that there was no rescuing. There was just being a witness to and being emotionally present and saying certain things I felt like I needed to say and really just holding her hand.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes, in a way, very beautiful and primal at the end. And, it's really very much like caring for an infant. You can't save them. They're headed in the opposite direction, but it's the same activities. You hold them, you let them feel your skin, you say things to them whether they can hear you or not. You know what I mean? My mom at a certain point wasn't responsive.
Mine too.
But we say things because you need to say them and because maybe some part of them is hearing. At a certain point, what we started talking about, Cheryl, is what's meaningful? What is going to be meaningful? I went out with my, 2 older kids because I knew that it would be meaningful for them, and I knew it would be meaningful for my mom to spend that time and to be with them physically in a very elemental way, not because it was going to rescue them or make me a good son or relieve my guilt, but because it was going to be meaningful.
Yeah.
And I could sort of feel at peace knowing that that was what needed to happen. You have that opportunity, Overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And God, you're such an amazing daughter
Yeah.
and such an amazing mom. And you need to feel that within yourself so that you can cast out all the garbage that is really taking away from you the meaning and profundity of both of these experiences. You didn't make this choice. You made a choice to have a kid. And that was a beautiful and exactly the right choice. That's who your mom raised. You did not choose to have your mom get cancer. You didn't choose for your parents to divorce. You didn't choose to have an autistic brother.